Testing, check, check, 1, 2, 3. All right, hello, welcome everyone to the Ninja Robot Studio LLC stream where I play video games and VR experiences and talk through them from a UX designer's perspective. Game development has a heavy and a direct influence on XR development, so it makes sense that we would study game design to give us a better understanding of how to create quality immersive experiences. And the plan is to have all of you in the chat participate, and that way we can learn together. And if you're not watching live, you can also participate by commenting on YouTube if you're watching it on demand later. So there's still a chance to participate. It's just not going to be live and while we're in the act of doing it. There are a lot of classes out there on UX design and UX processes, and more are coming out around designing for XR. And think of this as a kind of an unofficial and less academic and less expensive university labs class for UX for XR. We're going to be using critical thinking in our design analysis, and my goal is to help you to gain practical experience in this method as you participate in the chat. And if you check out the widgets on the Twitch page under the About section, you'll see this section called Rose, Thorn, Bud. And we'll be using this method each session to think through the games that I play. And this is experimental, and I will be iterating as I learn and as you guys provide feedback. And today is going to be a little bit different. Usually I play a game or a VR experience, but today I've set up the stream where I go by genre. So I started with tabletop RPGs, as you can see here on the... Can you even see my mouse? Yeah, okay. I started with tabletop RPGs, and then this one kind of stands alone. We're going to come back to action RPGs, but right now we're working on platformers, and we're wrapping up the current run of platformers, all the platformers I have. And every session we did a Rose, Thorn, Bud exercise, which is what you see over here on the corner. Let me change the size of my camera so you can see it better. We go through one of these Rose, Thorn, Bud exercises every time I do a game. And then if it's a 2D game, we'll talk about what do we need to think about if we're translating it into XR. And So now we have done quite a few. We've done 6 platformers, a mix of 2D and VR platformers. I don't have any mixed reality headsets, so we can't try mixed reality platformers. They're just not available to me right now. But we are doing 2D and VR. And so we have 6 examples here of doing this same exercise through all of them. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at that and we're going to synthesize that into some kind of learning. And I'm not sure exactly what learning we're going to come. That's what we're doing today. We're doing it live, is synthesizing all of this information into something. And so the goal here is to help you to learn how to do this for yourself. This is what we would call competitive landscaping. So if you are wanting to create your own platformer, for example, you would go play other platformers, if you can, preferably get other users if you have the funding for research, to go get other people to play these platformers and see what works and what doesn't work for them. But at the very least, you want to do what's called competitive landscaping, which is where you go in and you try a bunch of different platformers with various things that are similar to what you're trying to go for here. At the very least, go with that, and you might expand depending on whether or not what you were wanting to make exists yet. And then you would play those games, see what's working, what's not working, what could we improve in ours, what gaps could we fill in ours, and then use that. And then also what I'm doing besides just that is looking at best practices for UX for XR, because that's what I do. I create best practices around this space. As you can see on my website here, I have I can add it to the chat here real quick, the link tree for all the things. You can find out the resources that I create, the videos on demand. This Twitch stream is in there, and this website. And I create best practices around the space and talk about how to transition into the space from a designer's perspective, because that's my perspective, and look at how other people such as this have solved problems in the past. I'm creating a pattern library that lets you, for example, teleporting. These are how other people have solved the problem. The problem is moving around and mitigating motion sickness. How can we do that without breaking immersion? And how have others done it? And BOGO is the pattern that I have here that I really like. And then I'll go through and I'll talk through the detail, what works about it, what are the micro interactions going on. And I actually use this stuff in my own work. This is how I would document something in my own work to hand over to a developer and say, make something like this, but change it this way, instead of having to reinvent the wheel. So that's what the pattern library is. And it is actually being used by me now to create my own designs for things. So it's a useful tool. And the idea is to get lots of patterns in here for people to use, and you can use to work with your team to share, hey, this is how other people have solved this problem. So that, and one of the things that's coming out of this platformer is informing more of this pattern library as well, and best practices in general. So, and yeah, the follow up from last week is thank you again, Camille, for another YouTube comment. I really appreciate your participation in this. It's pretty awesome, and I like that you're getting involved. Please continue to do so, and feel free, other people, feel free to also get involved and add your comments to YouTube if you're not able to watch live. But I also do, if you do have time and can get on live, it's a good way for us to talk to each other live in the chat if you can. So, to synthesize. Research. Where to start? So if you look at how I do rose, thorn, bud exercises, you'll see that I've got very short, concise statements on Post-its. and they're clearly separated. So this is this is what's working. So these are things that you want to remind yourself. These are the things that are working. These are the things that are going well. These are things that I don't want to necessarily change. So we keep a list of those things, and we keep a separate list of, they're all very clearly separated. One of the habits of writing out a report of any kind of analysis or anything is that things are intercombined together, and that's fine for a report. But for research synthesis, for getting rapid information quickly, you want to separate out things so that you can disseminate the information in different ways. You'll see that I have connector lines, so that helps me connect thoughts, but they are still very clearly differentiated here because this is going to help, as you'll see today, with the synthesis into another report or another form of information. So then keeping it separated in this form is going to let you take it and put it in multiple formats for whatever type of report or deliverable or whatever it is that you need, like adding things to your backlog in your Agile tool, whatever you use to do your next steps. These are clearly differentiated, but you have the information that you need to give background information on the why of this to do in your Agile tool. Is just clearly delineated here. And so you can then create multiple outputs from this form instead of writing a report immediately and then having to dig through and find what was the why again. It's just clear and concise here so that you can quickly get it. And that's one of the reasons I like using the post-its, and it's one of the reasons I like separating it out this way in this method. I didn't come up with this method. It's been around a while. I don't know who came up with it. I think I learned about it from Luma Institute. That is where I got these. And Luma Institute, I highly recommend. I will put that resource in the show notes. LUMA Institute. I'll put that in the show notes later, and I can actually pull it up here. Institute. They have all kinds of resources. One of those resources is a book. I think it's under tools. Yeah. Innovating for People. It's a handbook of methods. So, and it helps you determine what type of method to use for what. And they also have what is called the Luma Workplace, where it actually helps you plan out your research. So it not only helps you decide what method to use for your research, but it helps you plan it out as well in a program timed. So it's a very good tool. It's an awesome tool. If you have the funding for it, it is very much worth it. If you do a lot of research and research planning. But that's where I got this method, but I've modified it here for the synthesis, and you'll see that in a second as well. But clearly you can see this is what's good, this is what's not working, this is what we need to do for next steps to change it. It's very clearly delineated, which is good for action-based work. And now we're gonna start taking all of the synthesis from all of the games that we played. I've got Jivana here, and Mariposa, Trine 2, Kokoro Clover, and Moss, and Ghost Giant. And I've also got the comments from Kamil Wanzek that he added to YouTube, so you can, if you participate, that stuff is included, and I do take it into account, and I do respond to the YouTube comments as well. So do feel free to do that. Don't think that you're going to be ignored or anything. I try not to ignore people. I just may not see it immediately, but I'm not ignoring you. Okay, so let's start with what is something that we'll just methodically, I'm very methodical about what I do, so I'm just going to start with Mariposa. And I'm going to, okay, what are the overarching things that work well? So let me look at Mariposa and see, is there something that is an overarching thing from all of these different ones, all of these different games that we've played, to see what is something that's working well. So local voice actors, not the normal voice actors, nice to have different voices. That's something that was independent to Mariposa, I think. Retro art design was independent. A lot of thought put into character designs. So let's think about that. So character design, how did the character design go on these different ones? I think actually they all have good character designs. Moss definitely has good character design. Yeah. I think so we can make this one, and that is a typo. There. So we'll just copy that one over. That one's a good overarching one. Character design does matter in any game. You can pet the animals. Can you pet the animals in all these games? Nope. Nope. You can't pet the animals in all the games. But that is something that I know. I talk to people that game, and if there are animals out in the world, like little foxes and dogs and cats, they want to pet them. So it just adds on an extra level of delight that's not required. But when you do it, gamers love it. So that, I would think, would go under the category of what is an individual game standout, what stood out from the rest. I'm going to change the questions here because that is... That is, it is a rose that stood out from the rest. So then I would say Mariposa lets you pet animals. A good quality game for an alpha version. All the other ones were like final, well, Jivana, yeah, I think all the other ones were final releases, so that's just a one-off for Mariposa. Signs and feedback on the feed troughs were a good thing. And that's just a... Did the other things have good signs and feedback? Let's see. And some of this is me going off memory because I played all of them. Not everything had good signs and feedback, even in Mariposa, but again, Mariposa is alpha. So it's going to still be a lot of work to do on Mariposa. So for context, yes, I played Mariposa and the Galaxy Man, which is in beta. It's an indie game made by someone local to me that is in alpha version. And I played it because they had a free demo up on Steam, and I wanted to give them early feedback. So I played that game for them, and they do still, because of course that was the alpha, and I think it might have been a prequel to the actual game that's coming out. So it's not even the actual game that's coming out. I don't think, but I did want to give him early feedback anyway, so that's why I played this one. And it is platformer. Jivana just came out recently. It is a French game that is also a platformer. And I should start adding links to the games to these boards so I can quickly go to this, like, game info. I'll make a note to do that. Adding the game links to the murals. That's just for me. But it's something that you would do if you want to quickly reference something again while you're doing your research. Go ahead and add your links, because if you're using Miro, whatever you're using, I highly recommend Miro. There is a free version. You can use a free version that you can add links to the post-its. There's a hyperlink option there. So you can add your references and your resources to the Miro board so that you can quickly access them. I do that all the time with other boards, so I don't know why I didn't do it with this one, but I will try to start doing that. So Trine 2 is an older game. It's a platformer, a 2D platformer, not a 3D platformer. Jivana and Mariposa are 3D platformers, meaning that you can move around more, whereas with Trine 2, it's kind of more like Mario Brothers, the retro, only a much higher quality graphics. And then Kokoro Clover is a retro 2D, a lot like Mario. And that's from Japan. And then Moss is a VR platformer, so 3D platformer. And then Ghost Giant is also a VR platformer. Both of these, let's see, Ghost Giant is available on the Quest and the PlayStation VR. I did it on PlayStation VR. If I had the funding, what I would do, and I would recommend if you had the funding, if you're doing true competitive landscaping and your target audience is a cross-platform game, then I would say get the games across the different platforms to see how they translate to the different platforms. Some do a good job, others don't do a good job. So, and we are going to study cross-platform games at some point. Not sure exactly when, because again, it costs money because there's not a cross-buy feature. They want to, most of the games want you to pay for each and every version, which is frustrating when you're trying to research games. Like, not, you know, most people don't buy cross-buy, but it's becoming more of a common thing now than it was before, because people want to be able to play a PC version and VR, because sometimes you just don't want to put on a VR headset because they're heavy and they make you tired and so forth. So sometimes you just want to play it, enjoy it on the PC. So Kokoro Clover is on Steam, Trine 2 is on Steam, Jivana and Mariposa are on Steam. I don't know where else you can get them, if you can get them on console or anything, but they're definitely available on Steam. Okay, teaching interactions as you go. I think that all of them do that. Ghost Giant. Did Ghost Giant do that? I probably didn't make a note of it. Let's see. They do have the tutorial up front. They have a tutorial up front, but then they also teach some things. So this one didn't do as awesome of a job on it. It wasn't horrible, but they didn't do as awesome of a job on it. Clear, but still fit the visual aesthetic. Levers, handles. It was a puzzle game, so, you know, some things you had to figure out. So also take that into account, that if it's a puzzle, what's the goal of the game? Is it a puzzle game? Then you can't just teach them everything because they have to figure it out. That's the goal. So taking that into consideration. Ghost Giant. They had a tutorial that it forces you to go through the tutorial first time you go through it. And then it teaches you some things as you go. So it did do that. And it had in-game reminders of buttons. There were some problems with it though. For the most part, I know that Jivana definitely did, Trine to definitely did, teaching you and having that, taking in that curve, that learning curve as you go, difficulty curve increasing over time. Kokoro Clover was easy, and then all of a sudden you got to the boss fight and hard, like immediately hard. There was no curve. It was just easy, hard. And that's it. So that one I would not say they did as good of a job on that learning curve. Moss, good job on the learning curve. Ghost Giant. Good job on the learning curve. The puzzle aspect of it. I think, at least for me, I had trouble where we stopped in the video. And that was from the puzzle aspect. And I talked about why that was. So the difficulty curve on this one, I would say, was probably a little bit complicated. And because of specific issues. It probably wouldn't have been, because I went back into it after the video. And so that's kind of a follow-up, is I went back in after we stopped, and after, because with that one, I was really frustrated about multiple NPCs talking at the same time and grabbing my attention, and in addition to Louis also talking to me and trying to get me to high-five him while I'm listening to all the other NPCs talk to me. Kind of like what you have when you're trying to have a conversation with an adult and then the kid comes along and starts like tugging on you while you're trying to figure stuff out and trying to think and have an adult conversation. It was like that, only in the game. And so I got frustrated, and it kept me from being able to figure out the puzzles because I was too annoyed at all of the talking. But I went back later without putting my headphones in. I left them off, so I wasn't hearing any of that, and I could just look at the game. And at that point, I saw, I figured some things out that I wasn't able to figure out with the headphones on, with all the noise going on. That's something to think about. And I do address it in the notes here. And we'll get to that hopefully in the video. But, so good quality game for alpha. Signs and feedback. Signs and feedback. So signs and feedback on... Did I complain about signs and feedback anywhere? Let's see. No visual load time indicator. Potential bug. Can't change voiceover. Yeah, there was a potential bug in that one. Sorry, I'm losing my voice because I'm teaching right now. So I'm talking way more than I normally do. My voice goes out pretty quick. Not enough tooltips. So when they do have signs and feedback, and I think that I'm going to go ahead and put it as something in here because it's something that you want. You want it in your games, is clear signs and feedback. Moss has good signs and feedback. Ghost Giant. And if you weren't sure about something, you would just go back in the game or go check the video. That's why we record videos of playthroughs, so that you can go back and double check stuff. And this is taking me longer than it would if I were just doing it without talking, so. The signs and clear signs of feedback. On interactions. Goals. So I may change this. I'm debating back and forth on whether or not it stays there or whether or not there's like, I don't think there was an overarching issue of unclear signs and feedback. I think I got clear signs and feedback from all of them. Except for that one puzzle in Ghost Giant that I was talking about here. And we'll hopefully get to. Okay. Teaching you interactions as you go. I think they all did that. Can I copy paste? Yes, good. Okay. Now Jivana. Music and lighting successfully setting the mood. Tranquil versus unease. Did they all do that? Let's see. Let me think, because I don't like make this note on everything because I'm just writing down notes on what I'm thinking about at the time. Ideally, when you're doing this research, you would have someone helping you, or you would be stopping and taking notes as you do it. But I'm not doing that. I'm just talking out loud while I do, and then doing the rose thorn bud based on my memory. If you were doing this actually, and that's one of the reasons it would be good to have people doing is participating with it live, is that you can take notes in the chat while I'm talking through it. And that way we don't miss stuff when we're talking about it. When we go back and do the rose thorn bud exercises. So it does help you get experience working with a team on this analysis. And it also helps us get better rose thorn bud exercise at the end. Music and lighting successfully setting the mood. So let's see. I think that they all did that. I think they all did that. Very clean UI design, no clutter. Did any of them have clutter? I don't think any of them had clutter. Alright, Kokoro Clover. No. I don't think they were cluttered. Moss and Ghost Giant definitely were not cluttered. Let's see, so these two can come over. And this one goes with this one, teaches interactions and mechanics contextually when first needed. Yeah, because that goes with that. As you go, the difficulty curve increases over time on what you, and building on what you learned before. That is an overarching thing. That is an overarching thing that I saw on all of them. That is an overarching theme that I saw on all of them. It kind of goes with this one, so I'm going to put it here. Environmental design is used as wayfinding. Trine and Kokoro Clover, it's pretty simple. You can only go right and left. Forward, back. You can't go, because it's a 2D platformer, so wayfinding is pretty simple in that regard. And take into account, it is a puzzle game, you have to figure out stuff, so you don't always know where you're supposed to go right away because you have to figure it out. That's part of the puzzle. But you're either going right or left. And since it is a platformer, all platformers that I can think of, I mean, I haven't played any that go the opposite way, but they all go from left to right. So simple wayfinding on those. Moss and Ghost Giant. Moss actually does some pretty... Moss, even though it's a 3D game, I hadn't thought of this, but Moss actually does that too. They go left to right. Even though it's a 3D game, they still go left to right. So that is... And they have trails, so their environment is helping you with your wayfinding. Mariposa. I had trouble with wayfinding in Mariposa. The first time I played it. Second time I played it, it wasn't as big of a deal. First time I played it, it was harder. Because there's a lot going on when you're playing a new game. So, and you want to take that into account. The first time people are playing a game, there's a lot going on. It can be overwhelming. So you want to slowly introduce people to things. That's why there's this difficulty learning curve. And if they're new to an experience, you want to include wayfinding. The instructions were not always clear on Mariposa either. I had trouble learning some of the mechanics. That doesn't negate this. Difficulty curve increases over time on what learned before. That's true for all of them. Some did it better than others. Jivana did a really good job on that. Moss did a really good job on that. I think Trine did a good job on that. Kokoro Clover, again, you just easy wall. It's immediately hard. Ghost Giant, again, it was just frustrating because of that one environmental design issue. I don't know if you'd call it an environmental design issue or an NPC behavior issue. Or both. And it would help if you had gone back and watched all the videos so you kind of know what I'm talking about on these games. So that's one of the difficult things about if you're watching this for the first time and you hadn't watched the playthroughs of the games. What I'm talking about probably doesn't make sense. So apologize for that. I do recommend you go back and watch the playthroughs because I do play through them live, and so you'll see how I talk out loud and think about them while I'm playing them, and so you'll see how I analyze them. Teaching your interactions as you go, that's already in there. Signs and feedback on troughs. Difficulty curve, environmental design used as wayfinding. They did not all include, so that would be a standout. Colorblindness settings. Environmental design is used as wayfinding. I was working on that one. Is that one that... Simple interactions. Were they all simple interactions? I'm just going to copy these and then rearrange them over here. Simple interactions includes color. This is from Jivana. I don't remember any of the other ones doing that. I could double check, so that would be a next step. Double check if any other any others have. Double check the accessibility settings on games, because I don't know if I. And I could do that by watching the video probably, because I think I looked at the settings on all of them while we were streaming. So I could just go look at the video for that instead of having to load each game and look at the settings. So Jivana includes settings for color blindness, and I think they did for audio as well. But I can see while I'm checking the accessibility. Environmental design used as wayfinding. They do use the environment in Mariposa. They've got paths and they've got colored domes. The problem was when you're using color as your method of wayfinding. If there is an accessibility issue, if there are people that don't see the color, then using that as your only source of figuring out how to get there is a problem, because you say go to the blue dome or the green dome. If you got blue-green color blindness, you're not going to know which is which. Or red-green color blindness, you're not going to know which is which. So don't use the color as your only option. So then that would be a recommendation. An overarching recommendation is don't use color as primary source of information for wayfinding because of color blindness. But they did use the environment because they had footpaths and they had signs in the placed around. And again, Trine and Kokoro Clover are 2D, so you can go one way or the other. There's only one way. Not hard. Jivana, they used the environment. They used paths and they used clear ways of, okay, I can go this way, I can't go this way. So they used environment. Moss definitely did. Ghost Giant did as well. They all did. They all used paths and clear ways. Yeah, I can go this way. Yeah, no, I can't go this way. It was pretty clear on all of them. So that's true across the board, except for that one little issue with Mariposa. Because that was the problem I was having. Go to the green dome, go to the blue dome, but then the colors that were being used were muted colors already. So it's like, is that blue? Is that green? I can't tell because the color's muted. And I'm not colorblind, I don't think. So, but I was having trouble telling, is that blue or is that green? So I was having trouble. And then simple interactions. So let's see. Some of them had a little bit more complicated interactions. Especially if, depending on if you're playing with the keyboard or with the controller. So that one is not fully an overarching theme of all of them. And I think I do already have a bud on that on Mariposa, talking about questioning. Let's see. Yeah. Is there a reason for them to be separate, simplified, interact? Yeah, I've got that. So, already got that note. So not all of them had simple interactions, so that wasn't an overarching theme. So now from Jivana. Jivana includes settings for color blindness. Mariposa lets you pet the animals. Let's see, tooltips non-intrusive but still perceivable. Was that true for all of them? Yes, I think that was true for all of them. I just don't always make the same notes every time. I would have potentially complained about it if it weren't. No option for manual progression, not enough controller type options. That was a common overarching issue, was not enough tooltip, or not enough controller type options. Opening scene, auto progresses, English subtitles, body copy too wide. Yeah, sudden cliff in difficulty, not a curve. Yeah. I'm not complaining about tooltips. These were a little too unintrusive. Sometimes. So I would say where was that? I would say tooltips non-intrusive but still perceivable on like with exception of Ghost Giant. Sound effects continue to play when the next scene is loading. See, did that happen on all of them? I think that happened on all of them. Kokoro Clover. It's always music playing. Kokoro Clover, Moss. I think so. Some kind of music or environmental ambiance was always playing. I think that's true. And then NPC character designs next to dialogue help convey tone and mood. That was in the dialogue boxes. That's not going to be always a thing that happens in VR. We have to think about how we handle our dialogue boxes in VR versus 2D. And I have done dialogue boxes in VR before in things that I've designed. There's a lot of detail. There's a lot of detail that goes into it. That all these little subtle signs that we notice when they're missing. But we don't really know what's missing. We just notice, okay, something's wrong, but we don't know what. There's a ton of detail in dialogue boxes and how you do branching dialogue. And I'm thinking of that being something that we kind of learn together. Branching dialogue in games. Because it's a big thing. Branching dialogue's its own art. NPC designs. So that is not an overarching thing, but it is a standout for Jivana. I'm going to put it there with Jivana. And you'll see I'm grouping post-its. If they have the same thought, I'm grouping them together. And then I'm spacing out things that are separate thoughts. So this Jivana goes together. I'm putting them together here. But then everything else is like spaced out a little bit. Just so I can quickly see what is a continued thought versus not. Okay, Trine. Music creates an adventurous. So do I have music? Lighting, successfully setting moods. Yep, I've got that. Environment, design, lighting, sound effects work together to create tone and mood. That's here. I just saw it here. Yeah. Character designs and rigging that matches personality. So that I've already got character design here. Here. Is that true on all of them? I think that's true on all of them. I'm just going to add that little bit of detail here. Character abilities work together to solve puzzles and make it through the game. That was a thing that was different. Well, no, Kokoro Clover kind of did that, but it wasn't the same. I'm going to say that is a standout from Trine. So Trine 2. Character, because you had 3 characters that you could play, and you individually walks you through with a good learning curve, learning each character and combining their stories into them finally becoming a team, working together. And then you play all 3 characters, and the way that you play, you have to work together of the characters to solve the puzzles to get through the game using your different skills. So you had to work together, which is promoting your team working to solve problems, which is really cool, depending on the skills of multiple people to solve problems, which is a standout thing that I really liked about that game. You kind of have to do that too in Genshin Impact, and I don't remember if that's on my list of games. I guess it could be. I wonder if that is a genre worth looking at, promoting teamwork to solve problems. Or, like, would that be considered turn-based? Because I do have a genre for that. Would that really be considered turn-based? I'm going to make a note. Because there's multiple types of games to look at for that. Like, you've got your MMOs where you party up and you have healers and tanks and DPSs, damage dealers. having to work together, but it's different players playing the different roles. Whereas with this one, you're playing all the roles, and on then there are other ones where it's turn-based, so you're still playing all the roles, but one at a time. It's a little fuzzy because you switch between the characters, but it's not turn-based specifically. Like if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, that's turn-based, like the actual tabletop RPG, the actual game. And that one's turn-based. So I'm gonna figure that out. Genshin Impact and trying to kind of go together on that, because it's rapid switching between the different characters with different skills versus a party versus turn-based. Those are different kinds of mechanics. I'll think about that. What games do I have? Or what can I get easily? Or in other words, cheaply or free, that I could play to do that. Okay, but that is a standout that I really liked from that game, is that you had to use the different skills from all the different characters that you're playing to solve the puzzles and get through to the next part. And they use design patterns in the environment to hint how to solve puzzles. Did they all do that? Did they all do that? Mariposa. Yes. Jivana did. For sure. Trine did. Kokoro Clover, I don't know that was really... Yeah. I guess. I don't know if it really fits in there. Moss, yes. Ghost Giant, yes. So that is... They're using the environment as wayfinding and guidance. Here. So now those go together. After a certain amount of time of no activity, a hint will show. Jivana did not do that. Mariposa did not do that. That I noticed. Kokoro Clover did not do that. Moss did do that, for sure. Ghost Giant did not do that. They just kept repeating the same words over and over. Okay, so this is standout. That I really liked about Trine too. And Moss did something different, but it's a little bit different, and I think I already have the note in there about that. Quill acts out what to do. Yeah, so I've got that in there already, which is adorable. I love Moss. I highly recommend it. So after a certain amount of time of no activity in Trine 2, which is pretty cool, and you can just go watch the video, see it. I don't remember exactly where they do it. It does it multiple times, because I'll be talking about something and then it'll... but what they do is, it's part of the narration. The narrator is saying, so-and-so is thinking maybe if they did this, they could do that. And so it was part of the narration, and it didn't break your immersion at all. It wasn't like popping up screens or like saying, click the button. It was saying, it was much more integrated into the story, which was a great way of doing it to not break immersion. a great way to do tooltips. They may have had something showing down on the screen too for tooltips but it was not intrusive. How they did it was not intrusive. Seems camera is on a lazy follow with the character, much less risk of motion sickness. On the lazy follow, yeah, that was something that was pretty awesome about trying to, because one of the things that I have a problem with that I have discovered while playing these platformers is that even in 2D platformers, I get motion sickness. So if I'm getting motion sickness on a 2D platformer, I am definitely going to get motion sickness in a VR game where I am completely surrounded by the environment. So, the reason that I was getting motion sickness, from what I can see, is that whenever the game has the camera connected directly to the character that you're moving around, when it's directly connected to the character is when I get sick. However, with Trine 2, it wasn't directly connected to the character. It was kind of on a lazy, like I'd say, a lazy follow. And you can kind of see that in the video, in the recording. If you go check the recording, that the character would move. So like this is the environment and this is the character. The character would move and then the environment would slowly update. Like they weren't on the same timing. And I didn't do a good job of that example, but if you watch it, you'll see that it's not one-to-one motion like it is with Mariposa or Jivana. It's separated. And I don't remember Kokoro Clover and whether or not how they handled it. I don't remember. But Trine 2 specifically, it seemed to be on a lazy follow, and I could play that one for much longer because the motion wasn't making me sick, at least not as quickly. Moss and Ghost Giant don't have the camera connected to the character, and I think I do talk about this in those as well. That I think is something I want to note. Trine 2 seems to be and then on Moss and Ghost Giant, camera is detached from the character, completely detached. So you're watching it like you would watch in real life someone else moving in real life. How does that work? Do you move when you're watching a cat run across the yard? Are you moving with the cat? No. You're staying still. Your environment is staying still. Everything is staying still except the cat. The cat's moving. No motion sickness. This is how real life works. But what we tend to do in video games and in VR games, is we tend to ignore that little simple fact about real life. That we're not the ones moving when we're standing here watching something move. Unless we're actively following it ourselves. We're not being drug along with it. And we're the ones controlling our movement. So, in some platformers in VR, I cannot play them. The camera is attached to the character that you're playing, and you're moving as the character's moving in the environment. And I cannot play those, and I won't buy them because I know that I will get sick. And they're doing it because they want to move you through the world. without you having to stop and teleport or anything. And a lot of people can play those. That's great. Good for those people. But there are ways to do it so that that's not, I mean, there are ways to design the game so that you can still enjoy a platformer without that risk of motion sickness. So why not do that? There are millions of people out there who get motion sickness. I promise I'm not the only one that gets motion sickness, because I've seen it in usability testing. Even in games where you're not moving, they can still get sick because of performance issues, because of jittering, because of inner ear issues. There's all kinds of reasons people get motion sickness, and when you do it, we can to mitigate that. And if you have a game that is necessary for that kind of motion, like flying or so forth, in a flight simulator or something, then make it very, very clear. That's my ask, is to, like, the platforms that sell these games and stuff, is to make it clear what type of locomotion is available in your game. Because, like, for example, Zenith, the VR MMO, I'm not buying that thing until I'm sure that I can play it without having to do some kind of locomotion that's going to make me sick. But I don't have that guarantee right now, because everyone I see playing the game is flying around to complete quests. And if you're required to fly around to complete a quest, then I'm not doing it, because I'm going to get sick and that's going to ruin my day. And there are plenty of other games out there that I can play that don't do that. So why would I spend my money on that game? So think about that when you're creating your games. Anyway, that was a side tangent rant. But Moss and Ghost Giant camera is detached from the character, which, like the real world, doesn't make you sick unless you have an inner ear issue. Okay. Kokoro Clover, the Japanese game. So it is a recent game, but they successfully made it look and feel retro. That doesn't have anything to do with platformers. Can you do retro games in VR? Absolutely. And I'm going to try to find some so that we can see that in another genre. It follows the design pattern for dialogue boxes. Has a good contrast of color. Do they all do that? I think they do. So it's a good contrast color. Mariposa, I wasn't completely sure about. Clear differentiation from the game environment from the dialogue boxes. Donna, yes. Trine, yes. Moss didn't have dialogue. Ghost Giant, I did not have subtitles on it. It didn't show any dialogue boxes. Moss did have narration. And when I had the subtitles on, it was clear differentiation from the environment. Mariposa did have clear differentiation from the environment. Indicator that it's time to manually progress the progress dialogue. Did that. Well, when you were able to manually progress, there was a clear indicator of some kind. Did Mariposa have that? Let's see. No, because you couldn't manually progress it at all. Okay. So there is a design pattern for dialogue boxes I was mentioning earlier. Did I already mention dialogue boxes? Tips, sound effects. Dialogue, help could play. Well, there's this about dialogue boxes with the character design next to it. That was not an overarching thing. It is, though it was on Jivana, for sure. It was Trine. I don't think you could manually progress. Nope, you couldn't on Trine. So this is a standout. On Kokoro Clover, Jivana did let you manually progress, but it was inconsistent. Okay. So Kokoro Clover, that's a standout for them. And that you could actually manually progress the dialogue was a standout on Kokoro Clover. Initial onboarding, simple, teaches basics of interactions. Creative design within tech limitations, 2D retro game. Show, don't just tell. I think that's a separate thing for them. They used that's a standout for them, I think. Well, Moss did some creative stuff too, within the limitations of the environment or the world that they were building. So, initial onboarding, simple, teaches basics of interactions. That is not in Mariposa. Because the interactions were complicated in Mariposa. I think overly complicated. At one point, Jivana definitely, it taught you as you went. So it didn't even have like an upfront onboarding. It just taught you as you went, which is, and Moss did the same thing, which is awesome. That's a great way to teach somebody how to play. Just show them in context as they're playing. Make it part of the story. Let's see. Do I say... So for a retro game that is like really limited in tech ability, there were some pretty good standout things about the game. Their design patterns, the actual ability to manually progress the dialogue, and Camille has some on here too I need to look at. You didn't add any to Trine, right? No. Okay. It just started here at Kokoro Clover. Initial onboarding, simple, teaches basic interactions. So Ghost Giant and Kokoro Clover were the only ones that did that. Here, I'm gonna just say that is a standout for those two. But that doesn't necessarily say that you should just teach everything in the upfront tutorial and expect them to remember everything, because they don't. They're not going to remember, especially in VR. Especially with a new controller that they're not used to, and they can't see it through their headset. Like you can with a game, you can look at your controller and see it and match up the buttons, but you can't do that in VR because you can't see your controller unless you emulate it in the game. So it's going to be a different need for VR. XR, you can still see your controller, like mixed reality, because you can still see the real world, depending on the level of digital versus real. But with virtual reality, you can't see the controller unless you peek through if you have room to peek underneath the headset, and then you can see it. I have to do that sometimes. My head's small enough that I can peek down through under the headset and see stuff. But a lot of people can't. So don't rely on that in your game design. Creative design within the tech limitations. That was a standout for them. Kokoro Clover. Limitations bring about good creativity. So don't think that limitations hinder creativity. They actually enhance it and increase innovation to have limitations and constraints. Ability to skip around chapters. That was something that you can do in Ghost Giant and Moss and Kokoro Clover and Jivana. I think you can do it in Trine too. I don't remember Mariposa. So that would be a next step. Double check double check chapter select on games, because I don't remember if Mariposa, if you could choose your chapter, if you could skip chapters and stuff, but you can with the other ones. You can with all of the other ones. I think you can with Trine. Yeah. So on Kokoro Clover, it let me skip the boss fight because that was that wall that I hit that I didn't know how to beat the boss, because I don't know. It was easy, and then suddenly there's this boss fight and I just kept dying because I couldn't avoid the boss and I didn't know what to do. But I would have rage quit. But seeing that I can skip chapters, I can just skip past the boss fight and keep playing the game. And still get the story, which you usually can't do. You're usually stuck at least in the games that I play, you're usually stuck at the boss fight, and then that's where I usually quit the game. Is that if I can't beat the boss I'll either go watch a video about it, which I haven't done for Kokoro Clover, or I will just rage quit and not play it anymore. Yeah, it depends on your target audience, on how difficult you make things, because there are some people that really love that and they'll just play it and play it until they can figure it out, because they love doing that. But then there are many other people who have better things to do with their time than sit here and play until I beat it. I have other games I could be playing. I have other things that I need to be doing besides that. And that's just making me angry. And not to say that people that play it until they beat it doesn't have better things to do with their time, because I'm sure that they do too. It's just my mindset is that if I can't beat it quickly or within a reasonable amount of effort, then bye. I'm gonna rage quit or go watch a video. Languages are listed in that language. English is English, Japanese is in Japanese. I don't know if that was the case for all of them. I would have to double check. I think it was, but that would be something else to double check. I should just have a list of double checks here, because that's what I'm... Okay. Here, double check. Accessibility on games. Chapter select. And language select. Like English is in English, etc. Because that's not always the case. Sadly, that's not always the case. It's only recently in like the last 5-10 years that has actually become the norm, because the norm before was all of the languages were listed in the current language. So English would be in English, Japanese would be spelled out Japanese instead of as Nihongo, which is what they would be understanding. That's only a recent thing. I actually used to have to document that on language selection tools on websites. When I would do international language, I would have to say, put Japanese and Japanese, and so forth. Because when you're reading a language, it's like, look at how different this language is from English. And if they don't, and Japanese is one case because they mostly know how to read their language in English because they learn English in school. But for the most part, that's not the case for most languages. They're not all learning English in school. So it's, and if I were on a Chinese website and I were looking for English, I wouldn't be able to read the kanji to see my language. I wouldn't understand that. I would need to see English in English for me to see it. That's how I change my name. And some were using flags instead of the words, but then that gets a little complicated pretty quickly because English is spoken in multiple countries. Which flag do you pick? And then, so just say the language and put it in the language it's in. And stop with the flags and stuff, because there's multiple countries speak the same language. And sadly, countries change their flags for various reasons. Okay. So those are things to double check. And then on Moss, let's look at Moss's good stuff. Let you initiate the start of the game instead of auto starting. So did anyone auto start anything? So Kokoro Clover did have that. There was an intro cutscene that started playing immediately. That I missed the majority of because I was still setting up stuff. So I missed it. And that happens in VR games as well. And that's kind of detrimental to your VR game if you do that, because people can still be setting up their headset and so forth. And they could completely miss something important. So do they all let you initiate the start of the game? Mariposa does. Jivana does. I think. Let's see. I didn't make the note, but They do. Wait, so let me double check. Kokoro Clover, Camille Wanzik's comment here. A rose, I would add attention to details on most parts of the experience. Border around the character that speaks, or synchronize dance moves of the hero with the music after the finishing chapter. Okay, that is for the Thorn. Here, let me separate this out visually. So for a Thorn, I would add that. Architecture fighting experience is not well designed. The health of a hero opponent should be in the same vertical line. Now it's in the bottom right corner. Moreover, I would change the... So this is... Information architecture fighting experience not well designed. So this would be a bud. Z-shape. Moreover, I would change the place on the screen of the action I can use, like assist or dance, to move in the same space of seeing on peripheral instead of top right corner, because I have to take my eyes of the hero off the hero to see my option. Or like this tutorial. Wait, no. So this is a combined Thorn and Bud. So then if you're watching this, I would say if you were doing this exercise and wanted to visually split out your rose, thorns, and buds, I would say this rose is, I'm going to point it to your box so it knows it came from you. The thorn would be, the rose would be attention to details in most parts of the experience. So let's see. I'll just copy that, put that there. And then add another post-it for border around a character that speaks. So that's I didn't notice that. I'll have to go back and watch that. And then, or synchronizing the dance moves of the hero with the music after finishing the chapter. Okay, and then for a thorn. So then you would put the thorn as information architecture of fighting experience not well designed. Okay. So then I would say that bud for that is to explore design that puts health of hero and opponent on the same vertical line. And then part of the thorn to add on to that is that right now is in the bottom right corner, and I scan it last according to the Z shape or F pattern of scanning content. So there's patterns of how you visually scan stuff, and that's what they're referring to. And I'm going to link that to here to know this is your comment and not mine. So you get credit, not me. And then, moreover, I would change the place on the screen. So this bug goes with that. And then, moreover, I would change the place on the screen of the action that I can use, like assist or dance. Have it in the same place of seeing on peripheral instead of on the top right corner, because I have to take my eyes off the hero to see my option. So let's see, that would be a thorn. So the thorn would be So those are the tooltips that you're talking about. Tooltip placement is in the bottom right corner. Wait, where am I? It's in the top right corner. I have it in the same place of seeing on peripheral instead of top right corner because I have to take my eyes off the hero to see the option. It's out of line of sight of hero, so I have to take eyes off hero to see tooltip. So now the bud would be explore placement of tooltips in relation to hero. Because you want to validate everything. I'm not saying that it is a absolute on the design. You want to explore your design because how is that going to affect other things? It's probably simple and it probably will work. But always validate. So moreover, I would change the place of the screen of action I can use to assist to dance to have it in the same place of seeing on peripheral instead of on the top right corner because I have to take my eyes off the hero to see my option. Place in periphery of hero. So you're going to have to play with the screen design to do that. And that goes with that one. So those are visually connected. Here. Okay. So that's how we would do it, how we would write it out on here. Just keeping them separated, but still like connected. Okay, now back to this. So that is a standout for Kokoro Clover. Okay. Now, did we do... So we're working on Moss now. Most of these things are standouts of the individual games. So it lets you initiate the start of the game instead of auto-starting. And so I think that is not the case for all of them, because Kokoro Clover immediately starts playing a cutscene as soon as you load it. Ghost Giant does not do that. I mean, they let you initiate. Trine. If they play anything, it's a trailer. I think what Kokoro Clover was doing was a trailer too, but I wasn't sure because I missed it. And I think it was just a trailer. Jivana. I think you have to start it. And then Mariposa, you have to start it. So I think that for the most part, I think that was a trailer that Kokoro Clover was playing. But I can double check that. Is Mariposa, not Mariposa, Kokoro Clover. autoplay at start just a trailer. Double check that. Because if so, then this is an overarching, yeah, they all are letting you initiate the start of the game instead of auto starting. And then this is an individual thing of how they let you start. This story on Moss seems to be using mental models for PlayStation controllers for jumping and fighting, maybe. I would have to validate that. Let's see. That's in the buds. Go at your own pace by turning the pages of the books. That's manually progressing. Animated storybook is a good way to handle a cutscene without causing sickness. That is a standout for Moss. Wait, I copied the wrong thing. Moss has that animated storybook. I'm gonna want to start trying to Moss and Ghost Giant. Kokoro Clover. I'm gonna start putting them together. That's another cool thing about using Post-its, is that you can rearrange stuff really easily. This is a Moss standout. This is Moss and Ghost Giant. So that you can group things together and make connections together. It's much easier to do it with Post-its than it is to do it in a Word doc or something. Some people prefer Excel, I guess. If you like Excel, that would be another way of doing it, or Sheets or something, but I prefer visual like this. But you can use it. You can totally use spreadsheet as well, if that's how you think that your brain works better that way, because then you can also auto sort and filter and stuff like that too. A lot of people do that for a lot more in-depth research synthesis. They use that method. I just don't think that way. Storybook tells you want to read it. Go at your own pace. Animated handle. Occlusion of Quill. That is a total standout thing. I love how they handle occlusion. That is a Moss thing. And let's see, the clever embodiment by making you the spirit guiding Quill. You can see your reflection in the water for added embodiment. So now Moss and Ghost Giant both make you a spirit. However, Moss takes it a step further by letting you see your reflection in the water. Moss and Ghost Giant. Why did that copy the same thing again? Thought I copied that. Nope. Okay. Moss and Ghost Giant. Create embodiment by making you a spirit guiding the main character. Nobody else can see you. Just them. And I don't know if these came out around the same time or not. I don't know the years they came out. But I think they were both like earlier versions of platformers. And you can see your reflection in the water for added embodiment. So that is a Moss thing. Okay, motion is handled well. Only small elements move while you stay stable. That is the case for... Let's see. Mariposa. You move with it, so no, I get sick. Environments. Jivana, I get sick. Trine. That is like a VR only thing. Camera is not attached, and I already have that here. And that you stay. I'm gonna add that too. That you stay in place. Stable. So viewer camera stays in place, stable for this one. And motion is handled well on small elements move while you stay stable. That is in the 2 VR games. Because in all the other games, there's more motion. Moss and Ghost Giant. I'm adding that to the standouts. There's a lot of standouts. There's a lot of things that they did differently from each other that stand out as good examples. But we want to differentiate what was a thing that one did versus all of them, because we can see patterns there of what's a good pattern that's coming out of platformers, at least the ones I've played, versus what are some standout things that people are thinking and innovating on and doing differently that we want to also look at. So that's why I have them separate. I have standouts that, let me add that. What are innovative things? Okay. What innovation is happening here? How about that? Creativity wise, like solution wise. Sound is effectively creating the mood. That was an overall thing that I already have here on all of them. Music and lighting successfully set mood. Yep. Directing attention without force moving the camera. Please. Using spatial audio and NPC behaviors. So let me think about Mariposa, forced camera move. Jivana would do cutscenes. So it's still kind of forcing movement. Trine did cutscenes but I'm thinking Kokoro Clover. I don't know that there was really anything to... They were using cutscenes. Trine used cutscenes and narration and glowing objects. Ghost Giant. They would use glowing things in the environment, spatial audio. For the most part. They didn't do it. They didn't execute it as well as Moss. Did they all do it? No. So it's another of the standout things. Getting really long. Let me add another column here. So I'll group it though. I'll group it down with this stuff. This was a moss, and let's see. I'm thinking, how do I do this? Because moss and Ghost Giant both did this. Trine 2 used narration and glowing objects. Did they ever pan the camera? That would be a thing to double check. So, did Trine 2 force pan camera to direct attention? How did Trine 2 direct attention? There you go. How did Trine 2 direct attention? Any force panning? Just so that I double check that, was there any force panning? I don't remember. So I need to check that. But so moss and Ghost Giant directing attention without force moving the camera, using spatial audio, NPC behaviors, glowing objects. They use glowing objects as well. And then I just don't remember about Trine 2. I know they use narration, but I don't remember. Their hints, they didn't like. I think they just used cutscenes and glowing objects. So ghosted controllers teach you the interactions without breaking you out of the experience. How did the other ones do it? That is a standout thing from them. Ghost Giant had a tutorial at the beginning. Mariposa had pop-ups that you had to read, so they weren't like guiding you through onboarding. Let's make sure I have that here. Environmental design tooltips. I did not say that about tutorials, right? That wasn't true about Mariposa. They did teach you interactions as you go, but the difficulty increases as you do. That's true. Did I put that as a Thorn that you just had to read? Let's see. Font treatment too small. Body copy can't manually progress. Nectar wayfinding. Minor disconnect between learning and doing. Like major disconnect. Sorry. Had to read. I'll just add the detail here. Have to read description of what to do. So you're not seeing it being done and learning it that way. So that's there, and that will be added here. That's already in my best practices, but then now I need to point that out somewhere. That we will get to the thorns. Okay. So continuing with moss. That is a standout for moss. Moss. Ghosted controller teaches interactions without breaking you out of the experience. And then Quill. This is the absolute, I love it. Love Quill. She acts out. But she doesn't do it for all the puzzles, she just does it at first. I wish she did it for everything. Because it's adorable. And it gives you hints on what to do. She stops giving you hints as you progress the game, I guess, because they want to increase the difficulty curve. But this is a standout, specifically for Moss. None of the other ones do it. She will act out what to do. Because she can't talk. It's cute. She's adorable and you want to protect her. That is only in Moss. That is not in any of the other games. The scene transitions are fade out, fade in, no camera panning, no sickness. That is the same for Ghost Giant as well. The other ones? I would have to double check. Lots of double checking going on here. How do the 2D games handle scene transitions? Okay. It's not as big a deal on 2D games, but we want to take learnings for XR, because what people will do a lot is they will just take your traditional 2D game patterns, because they've always worked, and they'll just translate them directly into XR, and you don't want to do that always, because first of all, it's a completely different platform. Please take advantage of the wonderful 3D space that you have around you. Please, you're not limited to this 2D screen anymore. There's so much more potential, so think differently about it, think spatially about it, but at the same time, you want to also think about the ramifications of patterns that don't just blindly pull patterns from 2D and put them into 3D, like your scene transitions and your cutscenes. Because a lot of cutscenes, like if you go into a dungeon in Final Fantasy XIV, for example, there's a whole lot of panning going on and diving and zooming through the dungeon, which is really cool on a 2D screen. But you don't want to do that in VR, because that's going to make at least half the people that play your game sick. So there are other ways to handle cutscenes. And so cutscenes and scene transitions. So use those constraints and your creativity to find new ways to make it a cool transition. And don't just blindly copy over what you've been doing. Think about it. Think about the ramifications of that. Based on best practices, based on the limitations of our human bodies that can make us sick, that can make us disoriented, that can affect us psychologically, because we are wearing instead of just looking at a 2D screen. Oh, hi, Phantom. I don't know why it's not showing on my chat thing in OBS, but I don't see your comments in the chat. Sorry. I'm just now seeing them. Nice when they show you your controller briefly to point out buttons. I love that. Oh, hey, Kirsten. I don't know why I'm not seeing your chat in the OBS, but one of your CS students, yeah. Hey, I know who you are, Kirsten. I am getting sidetracked sometimes. I don't know how long ago you made that comment. I'm sorry, I'm just now seeing it. Because I have it pulled up on my iPad too, so I can see the... I don't know why it's not showing in OBS for me. I probably need to re-log in or something. I don't know. But I don't know why it's not showing in here. I need to start looking at my iPad then. Any questions? Let's see, scene transitions, fade in, fade out, no camera panning, no sickness. So yeah, I'm double checking how the 2D games handle scene transitions. But that is a moss and ghost giant thing. I think that is a moss and ghost giant thing. But I'll be validating it to make sure. Moss and ghost giant. So let me shorten up some of this stuff here. Mariposa, Jivana, Trine. Here. Trine 2. Trine 2. Kokoro Clover. Kokoro Clover. Okay. Okay. So I've got that one there. And now I did those. Now let's look at Ghost Giant Roses. Load scene, sparkly blue. This was a standout for Ghost Giant only, which I love. Is that when you do the load scenes in Ghost Giant, the load scene is the time it takes for the next scene to load. It can be depending on how big the scene is and how large of the files and models and so forth are in the scene, then it can take longer to load. So you're a completely captive audience. It's annoying on 2D games already, but in 3D games, when your whole head your eyes are covered and you can't see the world around you and distract yourself while you're waiting for the game to load, you are a captive audience, and so you want them to not get... It's going to be even more frustrating if it takes a long time to load. So what do you do with that? In addition to scene optimization to reduce the time the scene loads, what can you do? And I have a video on load scenes that is currently early access only, but I don't remember exactly when it's coming out to the public, but it'd be coming out within the next month or two for everyone. But I have an article on it, on load scenes. But Ghost Giant. They let you draw sparkly lines in the air while you're waiting for the next scene to load. It's awesome. I love it. And then as soon as it stops working, I get sad. And it's that, well, I don't really care about the game. I just want to sit here and draw sparkly lines. That's my preference. For a little bit. I'll get tired of it eventually. So if you take too long to do something, there are hints. This is not something that happens in all of them. Definitely doesn't happen in Kokoro Clover. It does happen in Trine. And I like how Trine handles it. Moss, I like how they handle it. So we have 3 people given, so I might combine that somehow. After a certain amount of time. No activity. You get a hint. And this is something that I ask for in best practices. Is after a certain amount of time, hint is given. But then how do the different people handle it? So Trine 2. Makes it a part of the story narration, which is awesome. Here, make that present tense. I'll just keep it like that. So Trine 2, after a certain amount of time of no activity, a hint will show. And then for Moss, let's see. They handle it by having Quill act it out, which is, again, it's just cute. Moss has Quill act it out. And then in Ghost Giant, there is a blue, let's see, NPC gives hints and what they're saying, and then there's glowing objects that come. This is Ghost Giant. I'll just put it there. Let me see. I'm gonna have to change how I set this up visually a little bit. Moss, Ghost Giant. Okay. And then there's also an exclamation point over Louis' head when a hint is available. I'm just gonna put it down here. Some clear signs of grabbable things. Clear but still fit the visual aesthetic of the game, like your levers, your handles, your gears. I think they all do that. So that is the thing they all do. Did I say anything about clear signs? Let's see. Clear signs and feedback on interactions and goals. So here, I'll just add it there. And once you get a good like fluency of the best practices, or at least the ones I've written so far, I know there are other people probably that have written best practices as well that I just haven't had time to read all of them. Some of them you have to buy, and it's not happening right now. But at least from the ones that I've written and found is that as you get more fluent in those, you will begin to see, it's like as your fluency increases, you'll begin to see this is probably going to work, this is probably not going to work, but you always want to go back and validate with usability testing on anything. Because I've been surprised at things that work for one situation doesn't necessarily work for another situation. So we have to keep trying and keep validating that. Able to pause dialogue. I don't know if that's something that's available on all the things. And the only reason that it was a good thing was because they didn't let you manually progress the dialogue. It was auto-progress the whole time, which was frustrating in VR. Because for multiple reasons, and I talk about that here. Having trouble following the dialogue because I'm trying to figure out multiple things. And in addition to external things happening outside of the headset that was distracting me, like getting tangled up in my headphone cord. So as I missed dialogue, I missed part of the story because of all the things going on. And I had forgotten that I could pause the dialogue. And by the time I remembered, I'd already missed dialogue. So that, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's something that I want to add as a good thing because of all the rest of it. It is good to let you pause cutscenes. So that's something to double check. Can you pause cutscenes? Or story in all the games? I think you can, but it's in different ways. You like cheat the thing because you pull up the menu and then the game will stop. Or at least I think that's what you do in Moss. Because there are parts of the cutscenes narration that you can't pause, or you can't like auto progress. So I've got that as a question, so that'll be a follow-up. And then able to control the start of the experience. That is, I have that in here. There's signs, teach you interactions as you go, very clean, environmental tooltip sound. Lets you initiate start a game. Okay. Good mitigations for hardware constraints on your PlayStation. Do I agree with that? Do I still agree with that? Because there was a problem that I had. Not as well as Moss, for sure. Moss did a great job of it. I'm gonna apply it to Moss for sure. Fine, I guess I'll put it on both. Oh, wrong thing. Copy the right thing. Because these were both PlayStation games. Not as... It would be interesting to play Ghost Giant on the PlayStation. I mean, on the Quest. Because it's also available on the Quest. Because the question is, how did they handle that on the Quest? Because you could just turn on the Quest. Whereas with the PlayStation, and I talked about this at some point, I think it was in your class, Kirsten, where you have to face the camera with the PlayStation. And so if there's more stuff to see, how do you turn in the PlayStation without losing all your tracking? So Moss and Ghost Giant both had good mitigations for that limitation. But I think Ghost Giant could have still done it better than they did. But I'm wondering what they did on the Quest. Did they make changes to the Quest game to make it work better on the Quest? Or did they just lift and shift and do the exact same thing on the Quest? Because you want to take advantage of the platform and make use of all of the strengths of the platform, as well as mitigating the limitations of it. So you can adjust the sound settings and the language. I think you can do that on all of them. Can't remember if you can do it on volume on Kokoro Clover. But you can do it on Mariposa. I don't know if you can adjust language because it's alpha. See, was that already up here? A lot of thought put into character design, clear signs, interactions, teach you interactions as you go, music and lighting successful, and setting mood, tooltips, non-intrusive sound effects, lets you initiate the start of the game. So, what sound and language settings? But again, I'm not going to hold it against Mariposa for not having multiple. I don't think they do because it's alpha. I don't think they have it. But can you adjust sound settings in Kokoro Clover and Mariposa? Because those are the two I don't remember. You can in the other ones. And I don't remember about Mariposa. You definitely do sound settings in most of them, except again, I'm not sure about Mariposa. Or Kokoro Clover. Keeps me stable, doesn't move me around. The camera's not attached to character. I think I already have that here under Ghost Giant and Moss. Camera is detached from the character. Yeah. So that's all the roses. There's a lot of roses. A lot of good things. And now we go back and look at thorns. What are some thorns? Overarching issues for all the games. The music stops when the game window is, this is Mariposa. Music stops when the game window is inactive. I think that happens with a couple of them. That makes it cumbersome to test sound settings in OBS. That's a problem for me. I don't remember. Sometimes you have the game still going in the background and you want to hear it. That partially reminds you that there's still a game running. In VR, does that really... I'm not going to add it because it's not... in VR... Is that even a thing? Is that even an issue? I'm not sure that's an issue. So anyway, color contrast is low on the tutorial UI panels. That was only for Mariposa. Wasn't a problem on any of the other ones. Font treatment too small and crowded, sometimes blurry. That's going to be an issue in VR. You definitely want to pay attention to that in VR because of resolution issues. Was that an overarching issue? Do I want to make a separate category for individual issues that you still want to think about? I probably do. So I'll go ahead and do that. Gonna make a new category. These locked. Move all that over. We may have to like continue this. I may just do this live and just continue it next week as well to continue it. Because we're not going to finish this today. Okay, stand out. Individual. Spell correctly. Individual, stand out. Issues. What didn't go well that we still need to think about for XR. That's what we're getting at. So font treatment, too small and crowded, sometimes blurry. Definitely something that you want to... I'm going to go ahead and copy the buds now because they're here. And I'm going to move them up so that they're easier to connect here. Come on, I need it aligned. Okay. Body copy is too wide for easy scanning and legibility. Was that an individual thing? Did that happen anywhere else? Trine. So that's definitely something to think about. English subtitles, body copy, too wide. There you go. It was in a couple places. It wasn't an overarching issue. That one I didn't even try subtitles on this one. On Ghost Giant. Because they didn't have any dialogue boxes of any kind. Which is its own issue. But it does have subtitles. I just didn't try them. But Kokoro Clover and Jivana, or Mariposa, had body copy too wide. Okay. Mariposa, Kokoro Clover. Where was it? This best practice for body copy 600 to 800 is just for like 2D screens. It's not for VR. It would be a different measurement for VR. So there needs to be a max width for body copy. Is there a standard? Is there a best practice for XR yet? I'm guessing it's going to be different depending on your headset because of resolution, but maybe not, because still easy legibility is easy legibility. It's going to be based on, it's probably going to be based on poster signage best practices, because that's what I mentioned in there. So can we translate any of that? Can we translate that definitively? Right. Spell definitively correctly. Translate that to XR. So that, yeah, here's the standard. I don't know. Something worth exploring. UG max 800 pixels. 2D. On your normal screens. Can we do that for XR? Don't know. I'm hoping we can. Okay. Can't manually progress the dialogue. That is an overarching issue. I'm gonna move this double check thing over here because it just keeps getting longer and longer. Okay. Can't manually progress dialogue. Let people manually progress dialogue. That's like a definitely for VR. This was a cumbersome interaction, especially in battle. It was way too cumbersome. On Mariposa, that's thing specific to Mariposa, but you don't want your interactions to be cumbersome. Anyway, but that is an individual thing. But it's not copying the right one. Okay. And you can go back and check that video on that. I may have it like a little marker on the time where you go in there. I've tried to do time markers on the videos. If you want to go check that, it was cumbersome and stressful in battle. Wasn't a big deal when you're just doing stuff in world, but once you got into a battle situation, it's like, this is way too cumbersome for battle. It's like a difference in life and death, and maybe they did that on purpose to make it a difference between life and death. But there are other ways of doing that that could be better than just making it a cumbersome interaction. Yeah, that wayfinding, that was only an issue in Mariposa. The other ones did a good job of it, so I'm going to, and again, it was an alpha, so maybe they're gonna add wayfinding. But we need wayfinding so that people don't get lost in your XR experiences. So there's a major disconnect between learning and doing on the game interactions. This is another standalone thing for Mariposa. And again, yes, it's an alpha, so maybe they're going to add tutorials in the future. But they might not be. Mariposa, major disconnect between learning and doing game interactions. So you want to let them learn by doing. You can't control the camera zoom on the characters, so there's an increased risk of motion sickness. This was an overarching thing. But that is going to be a different bud for VR. Let's see, can't control camera zoom. That was only on, well, zoom, no. You couldn't zoom on Jivana, you couldn't zoom on Trine or Kokoro Clover. You can zoom on any of them, actually. That's, I guess that would be an overarching thing. You can't, because controlling the zoom, being able to control the zoom when the character is attached to the camera, like this is an issue if the camera is attached to the character. This is becoming a noodle salad. Okay, so give more options for camera control on 2D games. It's gonna be a completely different solution. Keep character separate. So if it's a 3D top-down game, keep the character separate in VR. So if it's like a 3D top-down game in XR, keep the camera separate from the character that you're controlling. And then I would go about explaining that. Right now I can keep it short. So again, we're doing short and concise right now so that we can write something later. So maybe a best practice will come out of this. Maybe a report would come out of this if you were doing this for a company, for a team on a project. Like if you're wanting to create a VR platformer, this could be, okay, now here are our best practices, or here are the things that we want to keep in mind when we're creating our platformer. These are the things that we want to make sure that we're doing well, the roses and the buds, and that we're avoiding these thorns. Okay, I'm gonna add this little context. Wait, where was it? This one? Here, because that needs that context. It's an issue if the camera's attached to the character. Not an issue if the camera's not attached to the character. Okay, so that's all the thorns for Mariposa. Jivana. Instructions are not always clear. This was a language barrier issue, I think. Getting an awful lot of noodles here. Here, I'm gonna move this so that we can put that here. And that here. So the instructions were not always clear on the Jivana game. Need to make that's Jivana. It's a French game, so it was translated into English. So the wording was sometimes odd. Again, I think it's just because it's a language barrier. So one thing to do on the instructions is to work with a UX writer on your wording and accompany instructions with visuals. There weren't any visuals. How can we add visuals while still keeping it non-intrusive? So that's a question that we would have to figure out if we were doing that. Especially, I mean, even in a 2D game, you still don't want things to be intrusive. How can you do that while still being non-intrusive? Inconsistency. Okay, so there was an inconsistency in manual versus auto progression of the dialogue. Sometimes you could auto progress, sometimes you couldn't. even though it looked like you should be able to. You should be able to. I guess we'll finish out the buds on, or the thorns on Jivana and stop there, and then we can continue next week. Because this is getting long. Lots of video, and then we'll just pick this one up next week. After Jivana, we'll start with trying to continue doing it. So, because I don't want to stop. So I want you to see the full process, but it is getting to be a long video stream, so I will continue next week on it. Inconsistency in manual versus auto progression of dialogue. Was that an issue with any of the other games? Yes, it was. It was in Jivana. Trine. There was not an option for manual progression in Trine. Kokoro Clover. I think it was inconsistent. Was it? No. It's inconsistent in Moss. Couldn't do it in Still Shine at all. I think it was inconsistent in Trine. Maybe. No option for manual progression, so it wasn't there at all. On here, there was a cutscene that you could not auto progress, or you could not manually progress. It was just a cartoon. They did that on purpose to make it feel like your Sunday morning cartoon. So then you would have to handle that differently. How would you how would you solve the problem of being able to keep up with it if the goal is to make it feel like a Sunday morning cartoon? Because those Sunday morning cartoons were loud, obnoxious, fast-paced. So it did a good job there. So it... Let's see. It was an inconsistent auto progression of dialogue makes me miss important story information. That is a common across all of them. So I'm just gonna stick with this one because this is overarching anyway. Just let people manually progress stuff. I'm gonna combine it with that one because it's already there. Auto progression. Okay. Inability to fully control camera movement risks motion sickness, and I think I already did that. Yep, already did that. Camera zoom or move. Well, you can control the camera movement to some degree, but you can't control. Okay. But as an overarching thing, camera zoom or movement increases. I'm just gonna change the wording. Okay, and so then do I have more buds for that one? Give options for more camera control on 2D. If it's top-down 3D, keep the camera separate from the character. Give the player control of the camera. Regardless, give the player control of the camera. Here, so that goes there. No, wrong copy. And let's see, explore options for detaching the camera from the player. For all of them. On 2D games. On 3D games, keep it separate. Let's see if it's top down in XR. And then give the player control of the camera. Regardless. Okay, no visual load time indicator. When there's a new scene loading, makes me wonder if the computer's freezing. This was on Jivana. Did that happen on any other game? Can't remember. So do I have load times in here? Scene transitions, yeah. I do have that in there. So I'm just gonna add scene transitions and load times. Do I want to keep those separate? I kind of probably want to keep those separate. How are load times handled? A lot of follow-up there. Potential bug, can't change the voiceover language back to English, stuck on French. That is not going to carry over into the thing. But I did talk about bug reporting at some point. I think it was in Everybody Saves the World. Nobody Saves the World. Nobody Saves the World. If you go back and check that video, you'll see where I talk about bug reports. I'll make a note of that on show notes. And that one, I think I did put a timestamp on there so that you can go back and watch it and see where I think I called it bug reporting or something. So you can go, how do you handle bug reporting? Talk about that a little bit. Okay, and then, so that is it for the thorns for Jivana. So then we will stop there. I'm going to make a note that we stopped. So pick back up at Trine 2 Thorns. That's where we will pick back up next week when we continue this next week. And did I have any other follow-ups from last week before we stop? Thanks again, Camille. Always. Oh, I did, that was on Moss. I already covered that. I think that was it. I don't think there were any other follow-ups. Camille has been doing a good job making comments on the YouTube videos. Did I miss any comments on there? Nope. So I will continue also showing you how to convert these comments into buds and thorns and stuff like I did for this one. How would we really make that? Because Camille also did comment on Ghost Giant and Moss. So we'll do the same thing for those when we get to them. Thanks for watching, and we will pick this back up next week, and continue synthesizing this information. I hope to see you then, and have a good week. And thanks for watching.